Hey everyone, hope you're doing well, and I'm so glad you've decided to join us again. Tonight we are exploring why you wouldn't last an hour as a Victorian servant. So before you get comfortable, please take a moment to like and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy our nighttime stories. Let me know in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. It's always so fascinating to see who's joining us from around the globe. Now it's time to dim the lights and relax as we start our story. The morning bell would ring at 4:30 in the great houses of Victorian England, its sharp bronze tone cutting through the thick silence that settled over the servants' quarters during the brief hours when work finally ceased. The sound would penetrate the thin walls of the attic rooms where housemaids slept two to a narrow bed, their rough linen nightgowns providing little warmth against the October chill that seeped through gaps in the slate roof tiles above their heads. Within minutes of that first bell, feet would touch cold floorboards throughout the servants' hall, and the daily ritual of service would begin with the lighting of candles in pewter holders, the striking of flint against steel, creating tiny sparks that would catch the prepared tinder and grow into flames that would illuminate the long corridors stretching beneath the main floors of the house. The housemaids would dress quickly in their regulation uniforms, each piece carefully prescribed by the household management and documented in the servant registry books that were kept in locked cabinets in the housekeeper's sitting room. The morning dress consisted of a grey woolen dress cut to regulation length, reaching precisely to the ankle bone, with sleeves that extended to the wrist, and were secured with small pewter buttons that had been polished the evening before with a mixture of ash and vinegar. Over this would go a white cotton apron, starched stiff with a preparation of wheat flour and water that had been boiled and cooled overnight, tied with strings that had been measured to exact lengths and documented in the household procedures manual that was updated quarterly by the head housekeeper. The cap was perhaps the most complex element of the morning dress, constructed from white cotton that had been bleached with a solution of lye and ash, then pressed flat using heavy irons that were heated over coal fires in the servants' preparation room. The cap required precise folding along lines that had been established by the household in 1847, when the current system of servant dress codes had been implemented following extensive consultation with other great houses in the county. Each housemaid would pin her cap using hairpins that were distributed weekly by the housekeeper, the pins having been purchased in bulk from a supplier in Birmingham who specialized in household goods for the servant class. The pins were made of blackened steel and were prone to rusting if exposed to moisture, requiring daily inspection and occasional replacement when they became too corroded to hold the cap fabric securely in place. The process of dressing would take approximately 12 minutes, during which time the housemaids would also wash their faces and hands in cold water that was drawn from pitchers that had been filled the evening before from the well in the kitchen courtyard. The water was often covered with a thin layer of ice during the winter months, and breaking through this ice became part of the morning routine, using the handle of a wooden spoon to crack the surface and create an opening large enough to allow for washing. After dressing, the housemaids would proceed to the servants' hall, where they would receive their morning assignments from the head housekeeper, a woman who had served the family for 23 years, and who maintained detailed records of every task performed in the household. These records were kept in leather-bound ledgers with pages made of paper that had been manufactured in Scotland and shipped to England in wooden crates that were carefully unpacked and stored in the dry pantry to prevent moisture damage. The morning assignments were read aloud from a list that had been prepared the evening before, written in black ink using a steel-nibbed pen that was cleaned each night with a solution of water and vinegar to prevent the accumulation of dried ink that could block the flow of writing. Each task was described in precise detail, with specific instructions regarding the materials to be used, the methods to be employed, and the standards to be maintained throughout the execution of the work. The first task of the morning was invariably the lighting and maintenance of the coal fires throughout the house, a process that required the housemaids to carry heavy buckets of coal from the storage cellars to the individual fireplaces in each room that was to be heated during the day. The coal was stored in wooden bins that were lined with tin to prevent moisture from seeping through the wood and causing the coal to become unusable. Each bucket held approximately 20 pounds of coal, and the average great house required the transportation of 30 to 40 buckets each morning to maintain adequate heating throughout the day. The buckets were made of galvanized iron with handles that were wrapped in strips of leather to prevent the metal from cutting into the hands of the servants who carried them up the narrow staircases that connected the basement storage areas to the main floors of the house. The process of lighting each fire required specific materials that were stored in designated locations throughout the house. In each room there would be a small wooden box containing strips of paper that had been torn from old documents and correspondence. These strips having been prepared the evening before by cutting them into uniform lengths using scissors that were kept sharp through regular maintenance with whetstones that were ordered from a supplier in Yorkshire. The paper strips would be arranged in a specific pattern beneath small pieces of kindling wood, which consisted of thin branches from birch trees that had been cut and dried in the servants' courtyard during the autumn months. The kindling was stored in wicker baskets that were woven by local craftsmen and purchased annually by the household steward, who maintained detailed records of all expenditures related to the maintenance and operation of the house. Above the kindling, larger pieces of wood would be arranged in a careful pattern that had been developed through years of experience and documented in the household manual that was consulted regularly by new servants who were learning the proper procedures for fire maintenance. The wood was primarily oak, cut from trees on the estate and seasoned for a minimum of 2 years before being brought into the house for use in the fireplaces. The lighting of each fire required the use of a long wooden match that was struck against a rough surface to create a flame that would ignite the paper strips, which would in turn ignite the kindling, which would then provide sufficient heat to ignite the larger pieces of wood. The matches were stored in metal containers that were kept dry through the use of small cloth bags filled with rice, which absorbed moisture from the air and prevented the matches from becoming too damp to light properly. Once the fires were burning steadily, the housemaids would begin the process of cleaning the rooms, starting with the removal of dust and debris that had accumulated during the night. This was accomplished using feather dusters that were made from the tail feathers of geese that were raised on the estate specifically for this purpose. The feathers were collected during the autumn months and processed by the estate workers, who would clean and prepare them according to methods that had been passed down through generations of household staff. The dusting process followed a specific sequence that had been established to ensure that no surface was overlooked, and that the work was completed with maximum efficiency. The sequence began with the highest surfaces in each room, including the tops of wardrobes, the frames of mirrors, and the upper portions of window frames. The housemaids would use wooden step stools to reach these elevated surfaces, the stools having been constructed by the estate carpenter and designed to be stable and safe for daily use. After completing the high dusting, attention would turn to the middle-level surfaces, including tables, chairs, and other furniture pieces. Each piece of furniture required a different approach, depending on its construction and the materials from which it was made. Wooden furniture was dusted with dry cloths that were made from cotton that had been purchased from merchants who specialized in household textiles, while upholstered furniture required the use of special brushes that were designed to remove dust without damaging the fabric. The brushes used for upholstered furniture were made with bristles from boar hair, which was considered the most effective material for removing dust from fabric surfaces without causing damage. The bristles were set into wooden handles that were carved from ash wood, and sealed with a mixture of beeswax and linseed oil to prevent moisture absorption and ensure durability through years of daily use. The process of cleaning each chair or sofa required a methodical approach, beginning with the removal of cushions and pillows, which were taken outside to be beaten with wooden paddles that were designed specifically for this purpose. The paddles were made from birch wood, and shaped to provide maximum effectiveness in removing dust and debris from fabric surfaces. The beating process would continue until no more dust emerged from the cushions, a determination that was made through careful observation and experience. While the cushions were being beaten, the frame of the furniture would be cleaned using cloths that had been dampened with a solution of water and vinegar, mixed in proportions that had been established through experimentation and documented in the household cleaning manual. The vinegar solution was effective in removing accumulated grime and provided a mild disinfectant quality that was considered important for maintaining healthy living conditions within the house. The wooden surfaces of the furniture required special attention, with different types of wood requiring different cleaning methods. Oak furniture was cleaned using a mixture of water and soap that was made from animal fat and lye, prepared in the servant's kitchen according to a recipe that had been used by the household for over 30 years. The soap was applied using cloths that were wrung out carefully to ensure that excess moisture did not penetrate the wood and cause damage. Mahogany furniture required a different approach, with the wood being cleaned using a mixture of water and beer, the alcohol content of the beer being considered beneficial for the preservation of the wood's natural oils. The beer used for this purpose was purchased specifically for cleaning, being of a lower quality than that served at the family table but adequate for the maintenance of furniture surfaces. The cleaning of mirrors and glass surfaces required yet another set of materials and methods, with the glass being cleaned using a solution of water and ammonia that was mixed fresh each morning in quantities sufficient for the day's work. The ammonia was purchased from a supplier in London who specialized in household chemicals, and it was stored in glass bottles that were kept in a locked cabinet in the housekeeper's pantry to prevent accidental misuse. The mirrors were cleaned using cloths that had been cut from old bed linens and hemmed to prevent fraying, the cloths being washed weekly in hot water with soap to maintain their cleanliness and effectiveness. The cleaning process required careful attention to avoid streaking, which was accomplished through the use of circular motions followed by vertical strokes that removed any remaining moisture from the glass surface. The windows throughout the house presented a particular challenge, as they were large and numerous, requiring significant time and effort to maintain properly. Each window consisted of multiple panes of glass set into wooden frames that were painted white and required regular maintenance to prevent deterioration. The glass panes were cleaned using the same ammonia solution used for mirrors, but the wooden frames required different treatment. The window frames were cleaned using a mixture of water and turpentine, which was effective in removing accumulated dirt and grime while also providing protection against moisture damage. The turpentine was applied using small brushes that were made from horsehair and set into wooden handles, the brushes being cleaned thoroughly after each use to prevent the accumulation of residue that could affect their effectiveness. The process of cleaning each window required the housemaid to work from the inside of the house first, cleaning the interior surface of the glass and the interior portions of the frame, before moving outside to clean the exterior surfaces. This sequence was important because it allowed for the identification of any streaks or missed areas that might not be visible from one side alone. The exterior cleaning of windows required the use of ladders that were stored in the estate's maintenance building and brought to the house each morning by the groundskeeping staff. The ladders were made of oak wood and were inspected regularly for signs of wear or damage that might compromise their safety. The inspection process involved checking each rung and support member for cracks or weakness, a responsibility that fell to the head groundskeeper who maintained detailed records of all equipment maintenance. The floors throughout the house required daily cleaning using methods that varied depending on the type of flooring material. The main reception rooms featured wooden floors that were made from oak planks that had been cut and fitted by craftsmen who specialized in fine woodwork. These floors were cleaned using a combination of sweeping and mopping, with the sweeping being accomplished using brooms that were made from birch twigs bound together with wire. The mopping process used water that had been heated in large copper pots in the servants' kitchen, the water being mixed with soap that was made from a recipe that included animal fat, lye, and herbs that were grown in the kitchen garden. The herbs used in the soap included lavender and rosemary, which provided a pleasant scent and were believed to have properties that repelled insects and other pests. The mops used for floor cleaning were made from cotton strings that were attached to wooden handles, the strings being replaced regularly as they became worn or damaged through use. The replacement strings were purchased from the same supplier who provided other household textiles, and they were stored in the dry pantry along with other cleaning supplies. In the servants' quarters and working areas of the house, the floors were made of stone that had been quarried locally and fitted together with mortar that was mixed on the estate. These stone floors required different cleaning methods, with the primary tool being stiff brushes that were made from plant fibers and designed to scrub away accumulated dirt and grime from the textured surface of the stone. The stone floors were scrubbed using water that was mixed with sand that had been sieved to remove large particles and debris. The sand provided an abrasive quality that was effective in removing stubborn stains and accumulated grime, but it required careful use to avoid damaging the mortar between the stone blocks. The scrubbing process was performed on hands and knees, with the housemaids using thick cloth pads to protect their knees from the hard stone surface. The staircase that connected the various floors of the house presented particular challenges for cleaning, as the wooden steps were subject to heavy use and showed wear more readily than other surfaces. The steps were made from oak that had been treated with linseed oil to provide protection against moisture and wear, but they still required daily attention to maintain their appearance and safety. The cleaning of the staircase began with the removal of any debris or accumulated dirt using small brushes that were designed to reach into the corners and crevices where dirt tended to collect. These brushes were made from stiff bristles that were set into narrow wooden handles, allowing them to be used effectively in confined spaces. After the initial cleaning with brushes, the steps were wiped down with cloths that had been dampened with a solution of water and vinegar, the solution being applied sparingly to avoid damage to the wood. The vinegar solution was followed by the application of a thin coat of linseed oil, which was rubbed into the wood using soft cloths that were made from wool that had been processed specifically for this purpose. The banister and handrails of the staircase required separate attention, as they were handled frequently by residents and guests of the house and needed to be maintained in perfect condition. The wood of the banister was polished using a mixture of beeswax and carnauba wax that was melted together and applied using soft cloths, the wax being worked into the wood grain through circular motions that required considerable physical effort. The polishing process was followed by buffing with clean dry cloths that removed excess wax and created the smooth lustrous surface that was expected in a well-maintained household. The buffing required multiple passes with different cloths, each cloth being used until it became saturated with wax, at which point it would be set aside for washing and a fresh cloth would be employed. The brass fittings throughout the house, including door handles, light fixtures and decorative elements, required daily polishing to maintain their brightness and prevent the accumulation of tarnish. The polishing was accomplished using a paste that was made from a mixture of chalk, vinegar, and salt, the ingredients being combined in proportions that had been established through years of experimentation and documented in the household maintenance manual. The brass polish was applied using small pieces of cloth that were cut from old garments and prepared specifically for this purpose. The cloth pieces were dampened with the polish mixture and rubbed onto the brass surface using circular motions that worked the polish into the metal and removed accumulated tarnish and grime. The polishing process continued until the brass achieved the desired level of brightness, a standard that was maintained through regular inspection by the housekeeper. After the initial polishing, the brass was wiped clean with dry cloths to remove any residue from the polish mixture, and then it was buffed with soft cloths that had been treated with a small amount of lemon oil. The lemon oil provided additional protection against tarnishing, and gave the brass a subtle sheen that was considered appropriate for a well-maintained household. The silver items throughout the house, including candlesticks, serving pieces and decorative objects, required even more intensive maintenance than the brass fittings. Silver was cleaned using a paste that was made from a mixture of chalk, alcohol, and ammonia, the ingredients being combined in small batches to ensure freshness and effectiveness. The paste was applied using soft brushes that were made from camel hair and designed specifically for use on delicate metal surfaces. The silver cleaning process began with the careful removal of each item from its designated location, with detailed notes being made regarding the exact position and orientation of each piece to ensure proper replacement after cleaning. The items were transported to the silver cleaning room, which was located in the basement of the house and equipped with proper ventilation to handle the fumes from the cleaning chemicals. Each piece of silver was cleaned individually, with particular attention being paid to intricate details and decorative elements that could trap tarnish and grime. The cleaning process required careful examination of each item to identify areas that needed special attention, followed by the methodical application of cleaning paste using small brushes and cloths. The silver cleaning paste was worked into the metal surface using gentle circular motions, with care being taken to avoid scratching the surface or damaging any decorative elements. The paste was allowed to remain on the surface for a specified period of time, typically 5 to 10 minutes depending on the degree of tarnishing, before being removed with clean damp cloths. After the cleaning paste was removed, each piece of silver was rinsed with clean water to remove any residue, and then dried thoroughly with soft cloths that had been designated specifically for use with silver. The drying process was critical to prevent water spots,
and ensure that the silver achieved the desired level of brightness and luster. The final step in the silver cleaning process involved the application of a protective coating that was made from a mixture of beeswax and carnauba wax dissolved in alcohol. This coating was applied using soft cloths and worked into the metal surface to provide protection against tarnishing and environmental damage. The protective coating was allowed to dry completely before the silver items were returned to their designated locations throughout the house. The kitchen areas of the house required specialized cleaning procedures due to the nature of the work that was performed there, and the potential for food contamination. The kitchen floors were made of stone that was cleaned daily using hot water and soap, with particular attention being paid to areas where food preparation took place, and where spills were likely to occur. The kitchen surfaces, including countertops and preparation areas, were made from materials that were selected for their durability and ease of cleaning. The primary material was a type of stone that had been quarried specifically for kitchen use and treated with a sealant that prevented the absorption of liquids and odors. These surfaces were cleaned using a solution of hot water and soap that was made from animal fat and lye, with the addition of herbs that provided antiseptic properties. The kitchen equipment, including pots, pans and utensils, required daily cleaning and maintenance to ensure food safety and prevent contamination. The pots and pans were made from copper and iron, materials that were chosen for their heat conduction properties and durability. The copper pots were cleaned using a mixture of salt and vinegar that was effective in removing tarnish and accumulated residue from cooking. The iron pans were cleaned using a different approach, with the primary tool being coarse salt that was rubbed into the surface using cloths or brushes to remove food residue and prevent rust formation. After cleaning with salt, the iron surfaces were treated with a thin coating of animal fat that provided protection against moisture and helped maintain the seasoning that was essential for proper cooking performance.
The kitchen utensils, including knives, spoons and other implements, were made from various materials including steel, iron and wood. Each material required different cleaning methods, with steel items being cleaned using soap and water, followed by thorough drying to prevent rust formation. The wooden utensils were cleaned using hot water and soap, with particular care being taken to ensure complete drying to prevent the growth of bacteria and mold. The kitchen storage areas required regular cleaning and organization to maintain food safety and prevent contamination. The pantry shelves were made from wood that had been treated with linseed oil to provide protection against moisture and insects. The shelves were cleaned weekly using a solution of water and vinegar, followed by the application of a fresh coat of linseed oil when necessary. The storage containers used in the kitchen were made from various materials including pottery, glass and metal, each requiring specific cleaning methods. The pottery containers were cleaned using hot water and soap, with particular attention being paid to the interior surfaces where food was stored. The glass containers were cleaned using the same ammonia solution used for windows and mirrors, ensuring complete removal of any residue or contamination. The metal storage containers were cleaned using methods appropriate to their specific material, with tin containers being cleaned using soap and water, and copper containers being cleaned using the same salt and vinegar mixture used for cooking pots. All storage containers were thoroughly dried after cleaning to prevent the growth of mold and bacteria. The laundry operations of the house required extensive daily attention, with the washing and care of clothing, bed linens and household textiles being a complex and time-consuming process. The laundry room was equipped with large tubs that were made from wood and lined with metal to prevent leakage. The tubs were filled with water that was heated in large copper boilers that were fired with coal from the same supply used for the household heating system. The washing process began with the sorting of items by type and degree of soiling, with different categories of textiles requiring different treatment methods. The finest linens and clothing were washed separately from work clothes and household textiles, using water that was heated to specific temperatures and soap that was made from the highest quality ingredients available. The soap used for laundry was made from a mixture of animal fat and lye, with the addition of various herbs and oils that provided pleasant scents and additional cleaning properties. The soap was prepared in large batches by the laundry staff, using recipes that had been developed over years of experience and documented in detailed procedures that were followed carefully to ensure consistent results. The washing process involved the agitation of textiles in soapy water using wooden paddles that were designed specifically for this purpose. The paddles were made from ash wood and shaped to provide maximum effectiveness in moving the textiles through the water while minimizing damage to delicate fabrics. The agitation process continued for periods ranging from 15 minutes to over an hour, depending on the type of textile and the degree of soiling. After washing, the textiles were rinsed in clean water to remove soap residue, with multiple rinses being required for items that had been heavily soiled or that were made from materials that tended to retain soap. The rinsing water was changed frequently to ensure complete removal of soap and to prevent the transfer of soil from one item to another. The drying process involved the use of clotheslines that were strung between posts in the laundry courtyard, with the lines being made from rope that was treated with tar to prevent deterioration from weather exposure. The textiles were hung on the lines using wooden clothespins that were carved from birch wood and designed to hold items securely without causing damage to the fabric. The drying time varied depending on weather conditions and the type of textile, with some items requiring overnight drying, and others being ready for removal within a few hours. The laundry staff monitored the drying process carefully to ensure that items were removed at the optimal time to prevent over-drying or damage from prolonged exposure to sunlight. After drying, many textiles required pressing or ironing to remove wrinkles and restore their proper appearance. The ironing process used heavy metal irons that were heated on coal fires and required careful temperature management to prevent scorching or damage to delicate fabrics. The irons were made from cast iron and were shaped to provide maximum effectiveness in removing wrinkles while distributing heat evenly across the fabric surface. The ironing process was performed on large wooden tables that were covered with thick blankets and sheets to provide a smooth padded surface for the work. The blankets were made from wool that had been processed specifically for this purpose, and they were changed regularly to maintain cleanliness and prevent the transfer of stains or odors to the textiles being pressed. The care and maintenance of the household textiles extended beyond washing and pressing to include mending and repair of items that had become damaged through use. The mending process required specialized skills and tools, including needles, thread and patches that were made from matching or complementary fabrics. The needles used for mending were made from steel and were available in various sizes to accommodate different types of fabric and thread. The thread used for mending was made from cotton, linen, or silk depending on the type of textile being repaired, with careful attention being paid to matching the color and texture of the original fabric. The thread was purchased from suppliers who specialized in household textiles, and it was stored in organized systems that allowed for easy identification and selection of the appropriate material for each repair task. The mending process began with careful examination of the damaged area to determine the best approach for repair, with different types of damage requiring different techniques. Small holes were repaired using patches that were cut from matching fabric and sewn into place using stitches that were designed to be as invisible as possible. Larger tears required more extensive repair work, including the reinforcement of surrounding areas to prevent further damage. The seasonal maintenance of textiles included the storage of items that were not needed during certain times of the year, such as heavy woolen blankets during summer months and lightweight cotton items during winter. The storage process required careful preparation to prevent damage from insects, moisture and other environmental factors that could cause deterioration during extended periods of storage. The storage areas for textiles were located in dry, well-ventilated spaces throughout the house, with cedar chests and wardrobes being used to protect valuable items from damage. The cedar wood provided natural protection against insects, while the enclosed spaces prevented exposure to dust and moisture that could cause staining or deterioration. The preparation of textiles for storage included thorough cleaning to remove any soil or stains that might attract insects or cause permanent damage during storage. The items were then treated with various protective substances, including lavender and other herbs that were believed to repel insects and provide pleasant scents. The daily routine of the household servants continued throughout the day, with tasks that were scheduled according to a system that had been developed over decades of experience and refined through continuous observation and adjustment. The scheduling system took into account the needs of the family members, the requirements of maintaining the house and its contents, and the efficient use of the servants' time and energy. The afternoon tasks included the preparation of tea service, which required the coordination of multiple servants and the use of specialized equipment and supplies. The tea service included the preparation of various types of tea, the arrangement of accompaniments such as small cakes and sandwiches, and the proper presentation of all items using the finest china and silver available in the household. The preparation of tea required the use of water that was heated to specific temperatures depending on the type of tea being prepared, with different teas requiring different brewing times and methods. The water was heated in silver kettles that were kept polished and maintained according to the same standards applied to other silver items throughout the house. The tea leaves were stored in specially designed containers that preserved their freshness and prevented contamination from other substances. The containers were made from materials that did not impart any flavor or odor to the tea, and they were cleaned regularly using methods that were appropriate to their construction and materials. The serving of tea required the use of china that was selected from the household's collection of fine tableware, with different sets being used for different occasions and different members or guests of the family. The china was handled with extreme care to prevent breakage, and it was cleaned and stored according to procedures that were designed to maintain its condition and appearance. The evening tasks included the preparation of the house for the night, with activities that were designed to ensure the safety and security of the building and its occupants. The preparation process included the banking of fires to ensure that they would provide heat throughout the night without requiring attention, the checking of doors and windows to ensure proper security, and the preparation of materials that would be needed for the morning routine. The banking of fires required the careful arrangement of coal and wood to provide slow, steady burning that would maintain warmth without creating excessive heat or consuming fuel too rapidly. The process required experience and skill to achieve the proper balance of airflow and fuel arrangement, and it was typically performed by servants who had developed expertise through years of practice. The security check involved the systematic examination of all doors and windows to ensure that they were properly locked and secured against unauthorized entry. The locks were made from materials that were designed to provide reliable security while being easy to operate by authorized personnel. The checking process followed a specific sequence that ensured complete coverage of all potential entry points. The preparation of materials for the following day included the arrangement of cleaning supplies, the preparation of fires for easy lighting, and the organization of tools and equipment that would be needed for the scheduled tasks. This preparation was designed to ensure that the morning routine could begin efficiently, and that no time would be lost in gathering necessary materials and supplies. The servants' quarters required the same level of maintenance and care as the main areas of the house, with daily cleaning and maintenance being performed according to standards that were established by the household management. The servants' rooms were furnished with basic but functional furniture that was maintained in good condition through regular cleaning and occasional repair or replacement. The servants' dining hall was cleaned daily using the same methods and materials used throughout the house, with particular attention being paid to the tables and chairs that were used for meals. The dining hall was also used for meetings and other gatherings of the household staff, requiring it to be maintained in a condition that was appropriate for these various functions. The servants' kitchen was equipped with basic cooking facilities that were used to prepare meals for the household staff, with the cooking being performed by designated servants who had developed skills in food preparation and cooking. The kitchen was maintained according to the same sanitary standards applied to the main kitchen of the house, with regular cleaning and maintenance of all equipment and surfaces. The daily routine continued with tasks that were performed in rotation, ensuring that all areas of the house received regular attention and that no aspect of maintenance was neglected. The rotation system was documented in schedules that were maintained by the household management, and reviewed regularly to ensure that all necessary work was being completed in a timely and efficient manner. The physical demands of the work were considerable, requiring servants to be in good health, and to have the stamina necessary to perform repetitive tasks for extended periods. The work involved considerable lifting, carrying, bending, and reaching,
with servants being required to move quickly and efficiently throughout the house while maintaining high standards of performance. The training of new servants was an ongoing process that required experienced staff members to share their knowledge and skills with newcomers, ensuring that the standards and procedures of the household were maintained and passed on to succeeding generations of workers. The training process was informal but thorough, with new servants working alongside experienced ones until they had mastered the required skills and knowledge. The wages paid to servants were modest but provided basic living requirements including food, shelter, and clothing, with additional benefits such as medical care and occasional time off being provided according to the policies of the individual household. The wage system was structured to provide incentives for good performance and long service, with increases and bonuses being awarded to servants who demonstrated exceptional skill and dedication. The social structure of the servants' hall was complex and hierarchical, with different levels of servants having different responsibilities, privileges, and expectations. The hierarchy was maintained through formal and informal systems that ensured order and efficiency in the performance of household duties, while also providing opportunities for advancement and increased responsibility for servants who demonstrated appropriate skills and behavior. The relationship between servants and the family members was characterized by formal respect and deference, with specific protocols governing interactions between the different classes. The protocols were designed to maintain appropriate social boundaries while ensuring that the needs of the family were met efficiently and effectively. The seasonal variations in household work required adjustments to the daily routine and the allocation of servants' time and energy, with different times of year bringing different challenges and requirements. The autumn months required extensive preparation for winter, including the storage of food supplies, the preparation of heating systems, and the winterization of various household systems and equipment. The winter months brought challenges related to heating, with the maintenance of fires and heating systems requiring constant attention and the consumption of large quantities of fuel. The servants were required to adapt their routines to accommodate the additional work required during cold weather, while maintaining the same standards of cleanliness and service that were expected throughout the year. The spring months brought opportunities for deep cleaning and maintenance that could not be performed during winter, with servants working to repair damage from winter weather and to prepare the house for the warmer months ahead. The spring cleaning process was extensive and systematic, involving the thorough cleaning of areas that had received only routine maintenance during winter. The summer months brought their own challenges, with the preservation of food and the maintenance of comfortable living conditions in hot weather requiring adjustments to normal routines and procedures. The servants were required to adapt their work schedules to avoid the hottest parts of the day while ensuring that all necessary tasks were completed to maintain household standards. The daily routine of Victorian servants was characterized by its intensity, complexity, and the high standards that were expected in all aspects of their work. The servants worked long hours under demanding conditions, with little time for rest or personal activities, while maintaining the households of the wealthy in conditions of luxury and comfort that required constant attention and care. The skills required for servant work were diverse and demanding, ranging from basic cleaning and maintenance to specialized knowledge of materials, equipment, and procedures that had been developed over generations of household management. The servants were expected to master these skills quickly and to maintain high standards of performance throughout their employment. The working conditions in Victorian households were challenging by modern standards, with servants working in environments that were often cold, poorly lit, and physically demanding. The work required physical strength, endurance, and the ability to perform repetitive tasks for extended periods while maintaining attention to detail and adherence to established procedures and standards.
The bizarre routine of a 1900s elevator operator. The brass plate beside the operator's stool read maximum capacity. 8 persons or 1,200 pounds, etched in careful block letters that caught the morning light, filtering through the building's frosted glass lobby doors. Thomas Whitmore adjusted his navy wool uniform jacket, smoothing the polished brass buttons that ran in a precise line from collar to waist, each one bearing the embossed initials of the Metropolitan Insurance Building, where he had worked as an elevator operator for the past 7 years. His shift began each morning at precisely 6:30, 30 minutes before the building's official opening, allowing him time to complete the essential pre-service inspection that the Otis Elevator Company manual required of all certified operators. The manual, a leather-bound volume measuring 8 inches by 10 inches and containing 47 pages of detailed procedures, rested on a small wooden shelf built into the elevator car specifically for this purpose. Thomas opened to page 12, where the morning inspection checklist was printed in neat columns with spaces for his initials beside each completed task. The first item required examination of the elevator car's interior appointments. Thomas began with the mahogany-paneled walls, running his gloved fingers along each seam to detect any loosening or warping that might indicate structural concern. The panels had been installed by the Woodcraft Manufacturing Company of Rochester, New York, using quarter-sawn oak beneath a mahogany veneer, a construction method that provided both durability and the rich grain pattern preferred by commercial building architects of the period. Each panel measured 36 inches in height and 18 inches in width, held in place by brass fittings that required weekly polishing with a solution of lemon oil and beeswax. The floor of the elevator car consisted of hexagonal ceramic tiles manufactured by the American Encaustic Tiling Company, each tile measuring 2 inches across and bearing a subtle pattern of intersecting lines in deep blue against a cream-colored background. Thomas examined each tile for chips or cracks that might present a hazard to passengers, noting in his inspection log any tiles requiring attention from the building's maintenance department. The grout between tiles was cleaned each evening with a solution of soap and water, applied with a stiff bristled brush and wiped clean with cotton rags, a process that typically required 15 to 20 minutes depending on the day's accumulation of debris tracked in by passengers. Above the tiled floor, the elevator car's brass handrail circled the interior at a height of 42 inches, supported by ornate brackets cast in a floral pattern popular among elevator manufacturers during the first decade of the 20th century. The handrail itself measured 1 3/4 inches in diameter, providing a comfortable grip for passengers during the car's vertical travel. Thomas polished each section of handrail using a soft cloth treated with brass cleaner, working methodically from the front of the car toward the rear, ensuring that no fingerprints or water spots remained visible. The elevator's control mechanism occupied the front right corner of the car, consisting of a brass lever approximately 18 inches in length connected to a complex system of cables and pulleys housed within the building's elevator shaft. The lever could be moved to 7 distinct positions, 3 for upward travel at varying speeds, 1 central position for complete stop, and 3 for downward travel. The skill required to operate this lever smoothly lay not merely in understanding these positions but in the subtle gradations between them that allowed for gentle acceleration and deceleration, preventing the jarring movements that might disturb passengers or strain the mechanical components. Thomas had learned these gradations through months of practice under the supervision of Harold Brennan, the building's senior elevator operator, who had worked with mechanical lift systems since their installation in commercial buildings during the 1880s. Harold's instruction emphasized the importance of reading the tension in the cable system through the resistance felt in the control lever, a technique that required developing sensitivity to variations in pressure that might indicate mechanical stress or the need for maintenance attention. The morning inspection continued with examination of the elevator car's lighting system, consisting of 4 electric bulbs manufactured by the General Electric Company and housed within frosted glass globes suspended from the ceiling. Each bulb produced 16 candle power of illumination, sufficient to provide clear visibility within the car's confines while maintaining the subdued atmosphere appropriate for commercial building interiors. Thomas tested each bulb by means of a small switch located behind the control lever, noting in his log any bulbs requiring replacement and estimating their remaining service life based on the brightness and color of their illumination. The elevator's communication system consisted of a brass speaking tube connected to the building's main desk, allowing the operator to receive instructions regarding passenger requests or building emergencies. The speaking tube's mouthpiece, polished brass with a diameter of 2½ inches, was cleaned each morning with a solution of alcohol and water to remove any residue that might affect sound transmission. The tube itself extended through the elevator shaft to the ground floor, where it terminated in a similar brass fitting monitored by the building's doorman. At 7 o'clock precisely, Thomas positioned himself beside the control lever and awaited the arrival of the building's first passengers. The Metropolitan Insurance Building housed 17 different companies across its 12 floors, ranging from insurance firms and legal offices on the lower floors to architectural practices and engineering consultancies on the upper levels. Each company maintained specific hours of operation, creating predictable patterns of passenger traffic that Thomas had memorized through years of observation. The morning rush began with employees of Hartwell and Associates, a legal firm occupying the building's third floor, followed closely by staff members of the Continental Insurance Company on the fifth floor. Thomas recognized most of these regular passengers by sight, knowing their preferred floors and typical arrival times with the precision that came from daily repetition. Mr. Jonathan Hartwell, senior partner of the law firm, arrived each morning at 7:15 and required transport to the third floor, where he spent the first 30 minutes of his day reviewing correspondence and legal briefs before his clerks arrived. The process of collecting and delivering passengers required careful attention to both efficiency and comfort. When passengers entered the elevator car, Thomas greeted them with a polite good morning while noting their desired destinations. The building's design required that passengers state their floor requests verbally, as no indicator panels or automatic selection systems existed within the elevator car. Thomas memorized these requests in the order received, planning the most efficient route to minimize travel time while ensuring that no passenger experienced unnecessary delay. The actual operation of the elevator required precise coordination between the control lever and the building's mechanical systems. To initiate upward travel, Thomas gradually moved the lever from its central position toward the first upward setting, feeling for the moment when the elevator car's cables engaged with the building's steam-powered hoisting machinery located in the basement. The initial movement required particular care, as too rapid an acceleration might cause passengers to lose their balance or experience discomfort from the sudden change in motion. As the elevator car began its ascent, Thomas monitored the building's floor indicators, brass plates mounted beside the shaft opening on each floor and visible through small windows in the elevator car's doors. These indicators, installed by the Consolidated Elevator Company during the building's construction, displayed floor numbers in raised brass numerals that caught the light from the shaft's gas lamps, allowing the operator to judge the car's position with reasonable accuracy. The technique for achieving smooth stops at each floor required beginning deceleration, while the elevator car remained several feet below the desired level, gradually reducing the lever's upward position until the car settled gently at floor level. This process demanded constant attention to the subtle changes in cable tension transmitted through the control lever, as well as visual confirmation through the floor indicators. Thomas had developed the ability to sense the approaching floor through the combination of these mechanical and visual cues, typically achieving stops within 2 inches of perfect alignment with the floor surface. Between passenger trips, Thomas maintained detailed records in a leather-bound logbook provided by the building's management company. Each entry recorded the time of travel, floors visited, number of passengers carried, and any mechanical observations that might require attention from maintenance personnel. These logs served multiple purposes. They provided building management with data regarding passenger traffic patterns, allowed for scheduling of elevator maintenance based on usage patterns, and created a record of the operator's diligence in performing assigned duties. The logbook's pages measured 7 inches by 9 inches, and contained pre-printed columns for each category of information. Thomas wrote with a fountain pen filled with blue-black ink, taking care to form each letter clearly enough for review by supervisory personnel. The building's management reviewed these logs weekly, looking for patterns that might indicate the need for schedule adjustments or mechanical improvements to the elevator system. During periods of light passenger traffic, typically occurring between 9:30 and 10 o'clock each morning, Thomas performed additional maintenance tasks outlined in the Otis Company manual. These included lubricating the control lever's pivot points with a few drops of machine oil, checking the tension of the indicator cables that connected the elevator car to the floor display system, and examining the brass fittings that secured the car's safety equipment. The safety equipment consisted of several mechanical systems designed to prevent accidents in the event of cable failure or mechanical malfunction. The primary safety mechanism involved spring-loaded catches installed beneath the elevator car, designed to engage with notched guide rails in the shaft walls if the car's descent exceeded safe parameters. These catches, manufactured by the Safety Elevator Company of New York, required weekly inspection to ensure proper spring tension and clear engagement surfaces. Thomas tested the safety system each morning by means of a controlled procedure outlined on page 23 of the operations manual. This test involved allowing the elevator car to descend at a slightly faster rate than normal while monitoring the safety catches for any sign of premature engagement or mechanical wear. The test required precise control of the descent rate, achieved through careful manipulation of the control lever to simulate conditions that might trigger the safety system without actually engaging the emergency mechanisms. The building's passenger traffic reached its peak between 10:30 and 11:30 each morning, as business meetings and appointments brought visitors to the various companies housed within the Metropolitan Insurance Building. These visitors, unfamiliar with the building's layout and elevator procedures, required additional attention from Thomas to ensure their safe and efficient transport. Many visitors expressed surprise at the elevator's manual operation, having experienced only the simpler push-button systems beginning to appear in newer commercial buildings. Thomas explained the elevator's operation to curious passengers, describing how the control lever connected to the building's steam-powered hoisting machinery and emphasizing the skill required to achieve smooth travel between floors. These explanations served both educational and promotional purposes, as building management encouraged operators to highlight the sophistication of the elevator system as evidence of the building's modern amenities and professional atmosphere. The steam-powered hoisting machinery, installed by the American Steam Elevator Company during the building's construction in 1898, consisted of a coal-fired boiler connected to a series of reduction gears and cable drums housed in the basement mechanical room. The system could lift the elevator car and its maximum passenger load at a rate of approximately 60 feet per minute, considerably faster than the walking pace required for stair climbing but slow enough to maintain passenger comfort and mechanical reliability. The boiler system required constant attention from the building's chief engineer, who monitored steam pressure throughout the day and adjusted the coal feed as necessary to maintain consistent power delivery. Thomas communicated with the engineer through a series of brass bells connected by cables to the basement, using a simple code to indicate when additional steam pressure might be needed for heavy passenger loads or frequent stops. During the lunch period, typically lasting from 12 o'clock until 1:30, passenger traffic patterns shifted dramatically as office workers departed the building for nearby restaurants and returned with varying degrees of punctuality. Thomas adjusted his operating schedule to accommodate these patterns, positioning the elevator car at the ground floor during periods of heavy outbound traffic, and at upper floors when return traffic predominated. The afternoon period brought its own challenges, as business meetings concluded and visitors departed while office workers continued their daily routines. Thomas managed these competing demands by maintaining communication with the building's doorman, who provided advance notice of departing visitors requiring elevator service. This coordination prevented conflicts between outbound passengers and office workers moving between floors for internal business purposes. The elevator car's capacity limitations required careful management during peak traffic periods. The maximum load of 8 passengers or 1,200 pounds demanded constant attention to both passenger count and estimated total weight,
particularly when passengers carried briefcases, packages or other business materials. Thomas developed the ability to estimate passenger weights with reasonable accuracy, based on visual assessment and years of experience with the elevator's performance under various load conditions. When the elevator approached its capacity limits, Thomas politely requested that additional passengers wait for the next trip, explaining that safety regulations prohibited exceeding the posted maximums. These delays, while necessary for safety reasons, sometimes created minor tensions among passengers eager to reach their destinations promptly. Thomas handled such situations with diplomatic firmness, emphasizing that the regulations existed for everyone's protection and that alternative trips would be provided as quickly as possible. The technical complexity of elevator operation extended beyond simple vertical transport to include coordination with the building's other mechanical systems. The elevator's electrical lighting drew power from the same generator that supplied the building's hallway illumination, requiring careful monitoring of power consumption during periods of heavy electrical demand. Thomas noted any dimming of the elevator car's lights in his logbook, as such observations might indicate electrical system problems requiring engineering attention. The building's heating system also affected elevator operation, particularly during winter months when temperature variations between floors created air pressure differences that could affect the elevator car's movement through the shaft. Thomas learned to compensate for these pressure variations by adjusting his control lever technique, applying slightly more force during upward travel on cold days when warm air rising through the shaft created additional resistance. Weather conditions outside the building influenced passenger traffic patterns in predictable ways. Rainy days brought increased elevator usage as visitors and office workers sought to minimize their exposure to outdoor conditions, while pleasant weather encouraged more frequent departures from the building during lunch periods and breaks. Thomas adjusted his positioning and scheduling to accommodate these weather-related variations, maintaining flexibility while adhering to the basic operational procedures outlined in his training.
The social aspects of elevator operation required diplomatic skills beyond mechanical competence. Thomas served as an informal intermediary between different companies housed within the building, occasionally carrying messages between floors or providing directions to visitors seeking specific offices. These additional responsibilities, while not formally outlined in his job description, contributed to the building's reputation for professional service and tenant satisfaction. Conversation management within the confined space of the elevator car demanded particular sensitivity. Thomas maintained appropriate professional distance while remaining courteous and helpful, engaging in brief pleasantries without encouraging extended discussions that might make other passengers uncomfortable. He developed standard responses to common questions about building layout, business hours, and local directions, delivering these responses in a manner that provided helpful information without exceeding appropriate professional boundaries. The mechanical demands of elevator operation required constant physical attention throughout the workday. The control lever's weight and resistance provided continuous feedback about the elevator system's condition, changes in this feedback indicating potential mechanical problems or the need for maintenance attention. Thomas's hands and arms developed sensitivity to these mechanical variations, allowing him to detect problems before they became serious enough to interrupt service or endanger passengers. The brass control lever itself measured 1 3/4 inches in diameter at its grip, wrapped with leather strips to provide secure handling during extended periods of operation. The leather wrapping required monthly replacement due to wear from constant handling, a task performed by the building's maintenance staff using leather strips specially treated to resist moisture and oil absorption from the operator's gloves. Thomas wore regulation cotton gloves during all operating hours, both to maintain proper grip on the control lever and to prevent skin oils from tarnishing the brass fittings throughout the elevator car. The gloves provided by building management and replaced weekly featured reinforced palms and fingers to withstand the repetitive motions required for elevator operation. The white cotton material showed soil and wear clearly, ensuring that operators maintained appropriate professional appearance standards. The afternoon hours brought their own rhythm to the building's elevator service, as the morning's crisp efficiency gave way to the more leisurely pace of established business routines. Between 2 and 3 o'clock, Passenger traffic typically decreased as office workers settled into their afternoon tasks, allowing Thomas time for more detailed maintenance procedures outlined in the comprehensive Otis manual. These procedures included examination of the elevator car's ventilation system, consisting of brass grills installed near the ceiling to allow air circulation between the car and the shaft. The ventilation grills, manufactured by the Acme Metalworks Company of Detroit, measured 8 inches by 4 inches and featured a geometric pattern of diamond-shaped openings designed to maximize airflow while preventing debris from entering the elevator car. Thomas cleaned these grills weekly using a stiff brush and soapy water, ensuring that each diamond-shaped opening remained clear of dust and lint that might accumulate from passengers' clothing and the building's general atmosphere. The shaft itself required monthly inspection, performed jointly by Thomas and the building's maintenance supervisor. These inspections involved examining the guide rails that ran the full height of the shaft, checking for proper alignment and lubrication of the tracks along which the elevator car traveled. The guide rails, manufactured by the Consolidated Steel Company and installed during the building's construction, consisted of steel bars measuring 2 inches by 4 inches in cross-section, bolted to the shaft walls at intervals of 6 feet. Each guide rail section bore identification marks stamped by the manufacturer, indicating the steel's grade and production date. Thomas recorded these identification numbers in a separate maintenance log, creating a complete inventory of the elevator system's components that could be referenced during future repairs or upgrades. The steel rails showed patterns of wear corresponding to the elevator car's frequent stops at the most heavily used floors, particularly the 3rd and 5th floors where the building's largest tenant companies maintained their offices. The lubrication of guide rails required application of a specific petroleum-based compound recommended by the Otis Company for elevator installations. This compound, delivered monthly in 5-gallon containers bearing the Otis Company seal, possessed properties that prevented corrosion while providing smooth operation of the elevator car's guide wheels. Thomas applied the lubricant using a long-handled brush, working systematically from the bottom of the shaft upward to ensure complete coverage of all rail surfaces. The guide wheels themselves, 4 brass-rimmed wheels mounted on the sides of the elevator car, required weekly inspection for proper alignment and wear patterns. Each wheel measured 6 inches in diameter with a brass rim 1 inch in width, designed to roll smoothly along the guide rails while maintaining the elevator car's proper position within the shaft. Thomas checked the wheel's rotation by manually spinning each one and listening for any irregularities in sound that might indicate bearing problems or debris accumulation. The elevator car's suspension system represented the most critical aspect of its safe operation, consisting of multiple steel cables manufactured by the American Wire Rope Company to specifications established by the Otis Engineering Department. Each cable measured 3/4 of an inch in diameter and consisted of multiple strands of high-carbon steel wire twisted together to provide maximum strength and flexibility. The cables connected the elevator car to the counterweight system located at the top of the shaft, creating a balanced system that reduced the power required from the steam engine. The counterweight consisted of cast iron blocks totaling approximately 800 pounds, suspended from cables identical to those supporting the elevator car. This weight offset a portion of the elevator car's weight plus an estimated average passenger load, allowing the steam engine to provide the additional power needed for vertical movement, rather than supporting the full weight of the loaded car. Thomas monitored the counterweight's position through a small window in the shaft wall, ensuring that it moved smoothly and remained properly aligned with its guide tracks. The steam engine's operation required coordination between Thomas and the building's engineer, communicated through a system of brass bells and speaking tubes that connected all floors to the basement mechanical room. When Thomas anticipated heavy passenger loads or frequent stops, he signaled the engineer to increase steam pressure, ensuring adequate power for smooth elevator operation. The engineer responded with confirmation signals, indicating when pressure adjustments had been completed, and the elevator system was ready for increased demand. The basement mechanical room housed not only the steam engine, but also the complex system of pulleys and cables that transmitted power from the engine to the elevator car. Thomas visited this room daily during his lunch break, observing the mechanical systems in operation, and discussing any concerns with the chief engineer. These conversations provided valuable insights into the elevator's performance from the mechanical perspective, complementing Thomas's operational observations with technical data about steam pressure, cable tension and mechanical wear. The pulley system consisted of multiple wheels ranging in diameter from 18 inches to 4 feet, arranged in a configuration that provided mechanical advantage while maintaining smooth power transmission. Each pulley bore brass nameplate, indicating its manufacturer, installation date and load rating, information that Thomas recorded in his maintenance log for reference during future inspections. The largest pulleys, manufactured by the Machinery Corporation of America, required monthly lubrication of their bearing systems using a special grease formulated for heavy-duty industrial applications. The cables connecting the pulleys to the elevator car passed through the shaft via a series of guide mechanisms designed to prevent tangling or excessive wear. These guides, constructed of polished brass and mounted at regular intervals throughout the shaft, required regular cleaning and adjustment to maintain proper cable alignment. Thomas performed these adjustments using specialized tools provided by the Otis Company, following procedures outlined in technical bulletins distributed to certified elevator operators. The building's electrical system provided power for the elevator car's lighting and communication equipment, drawn from a central generator located adjacent to the steam engine in the basement. The generator, manufactured by the Westinghouse Electric Company, produced direct current at 110 volts, sufficient for the building's lighting needs while maintaining compatibility with the elevator's electrical components. Thomas monitored the elevator's electrical consumption through a small ammeter mounted beside the control lever, noting any variations that might indicate electrical problems requiring attention. The communication system extended beyond the basic speaking tube to include a series of electrical signals that allowed coordination between the elevator operator and various building personnel. These signals, transmitted through copper wires running parallel to the elevator cables, provided instant communication capability essential for efficient building operations. Thomas used these signals to coordinate with the building's doorman regarding passenger arrivals, with the maintenance staff regarding mechanical concerns, and with company representatives regarding special service requests. Evening operations began at 4 o'clock as office workers prepared to conclude their business day and depart the building. This period required careful scheduling to accommodate the concentrated departure of employees while maintaining service for visitors and workers with extended hours. Thomas adjusted his positioning strategy, keeping the elevator car at upper floors during the early evening period when outbound traffic predominated, then gradually shifting to lower floors as departure traffic diminished. The building's lighting system transitioned from natural daylight to artificial illumination during the evening hours, affecting visibility within the elevator shaft and requiring adjustment of Thomas's operational techniques. The shaft's gas lamps, installed at each floor level, provided adequate illumination for safe operation but created different visual conditions than the morning's natural light. Thomas had learned to compensate for these lighting variations, relying more heavily on mechanical feedback from the control lever and auditory cues from the elevator's movement. Why ironing was one of the worst household chores. The heavy cast iron flat iron rested on the kitchen stove's surface, its black metal body absorbing heat from the coal fire that had been burning steadily since 5 o'clock in the morning. Margaret Henley lifted the iron with practiced caution, testing its temperature by holding her hand several inches above its polished surface, feeling the waves of heat that indicated readiness for the day's pressing work. The iron weighed nearly 7 pounds when properly heated, its solid construction designed to retain and distribute heat evenly across the fabrics that would occupy the next 6 hours of her Tuesday routine. The ironing board stood beside the kitchen window, positioned to capture the morning light that filtered through glass panes still bearing traces of winter's condensation. The board itself measured 4 feet in length and 14 inches in width, its surface padded with layers of wool felt covered by a cotton cloth that showed the accumulated stains and scorch marks of countless ironing sessions. Margaret had constructed this padding herself, using wool salvaged from worn blankets and cotton sheeting that had grown too thin for bed linens, but remained serviceable for utilitarian purposes. The weekly wash, completed the previous day after hours of scrubbing, boiling and rinsing, hung throughout the house in various states of dampness. Cotton shirts and chemises draped over wooden chairs, woolen stockings stretched between furniture legs, and delicate linen handkerchiefs lay flat on towels spread across the dining table. Each garment required specific moisture content for successful ironing. Too wet, and the fabric would scorch; too dry, and wrinkles would prove stubborn and resistant to the iron's heat and pressure. Margaret began her assessment of the laundry, feeling each piece with experienced fingers that could gauge moisture levels with remarkable accuracy. The cotton work shirts belonging to her husband required slight dampness, achieved by sprinkling them with water from a bottle fitted with a perforated cork stopper. The linen tablecloths needed more substantial moisture, requiring careful rolling and wrapping in damp towels to achieve uniform humidity throughout their considerable breadth. Delicate items such as silk ribbons and fine cotton lace demanded the most careful preparation, as their fibers could be permanently damaged by excessive heat or moisture. The stove maintained 3 separate flat irons in various stages of heating, a system that allowed continuous work without pausing to reheat a single iron. Margaret rotated these irons according to their temperature requirements and the demands of different fabric types. The heaviest iron, weighing nearly 8 pounds, was reserved for thick cotton sheets and heavy woolen garments that required substantial heat and pressure to achieve proper smoothness. The medium iron, approximately 6 pounds, handled most everyday cotton garments and lighter woolen items. The smallest iron, weighing 4 pounds, was designated for delicate fabrics and detailed work around buttons, pleats, and intricate seams. Each iron required careful monitoring to maintain optimal temperature. Too hot, and the iron would scorch delicate fabrics or leave brown marks on white cotton. Too cool, and the iron would fail to remove wrinkles effectively, requiring repeated passes that increased both labor and the risk of fabric damage. Margaret tested iron temperature using several methods learned through years of experience, holding her hand above the surface to gauge heat intensity, sprinkling drops of water that should sizzle briefly without spattering violently, and touching the iron quickly to a damp cloth to observe steam production. The first garments of the day were her husband's work shirts, heavy cotton garments that could withstand high heat and benefited from the maximum pressure her strongest iron could provide. She began with the shirt collars, the most visible portion of the garment, and therefore requiring the most careful attention. The collar required precise technique, positioning the fabric smoothly across the ironing board, applying the iron with firm downward pressure, and moving in straight lines from the collar's center toward its points to avoid creating new wrinkles while eliminating existing ones. The shirt's body presented its own challenges, with front panels requiring careful navigation around buttonholes and the back panel demanding attention to seam alignment. Margaret worked methodically from top to bottom, ensuring that each section was completely smooth before proceeding to the next. The sleeves required particular skill, as their cylindrical shape made it difficult to achieve smoothness without creating creases along their length. She inserted a specially shaped wooden form into each sleeve, providing a firm surface for ironing while maintaining the sleeve's proper shape. The technique for ironing sleeves had been passed down from Margaret's mother, who had learned it from her own mother during the decades when household management represented one of the few areas where women exercised complete authority and developed specialized expertise. The wooden sleeve form, carved from maple by Margaret's father-in-law, measured 18 inches in length, and tapered from 3 inches in width at the shoulder to 2 inches at the cuff. Its smooth surface had been sanded and oiled to prevent snagging delicate fabrics while providing the firm support necessary for effective pressing. Between shirts, Margaret returned her cooling iron to the stove and selected the next iron in rotation, a process that required timing and spatial awareness to maintain efficiency while avoiding burns from the multiple hot implements. The kitchen during ironing day resembled a carefully choreographed workspace, with heated irons, damp garments and pressing surfaces arranged to minimize movement while maximizing safety. Margaret wore thick cotton gloves on her left hand to protect against accidental contact with hot metal, while her right hand remained bare to maintain the sensitivity necessary for delicate fabric manipulation. The morning progressed through layers of clothing complexity, from simple cotton garments to more challenging items requiring specialized techniques. Woolen stockings demanded careful attention to maintain their shape while removing the wrinkles created by the washing and drying process. Margaret stretched each stocking over a wooden form shaped like a human leg from knee to foot, applying gentle heat and pressure to smooth the wool fibers without felting or shrinking the delicate knit construction. Linen tablecloths represented the most demanding aspect of the ironing routine, their large size requiring significant physical effort, and their fine weave demanding perfect technique to achieve the smooth, lustrous finish appropriate for formal dining. Margaret spread each tablecloth across the dining table, working in sections to press the entire surface without creating new wrinkles in previously ironed areas. The process required considerable strength, as the heavy linen combined with the weight of the iron created substantial physical demands on her arms and shoulders. The tablecloth's hemmed edges required special attention, as the multiple layers of folded linen created thick areas that resisted smoothing and could easily scorch if subjected to excessive heat. Margaret reduced iron temperature for these areas, compensating with increased pressure and multiple passes to achieve satisfactory results. The corners presented particular challenges, with their complex folds requiring careful manipulation to achieve crisp square angles that would lay flat when the cloth was used. Delicate items such as silk scarves and fine cotton handkerchiefs concluded the morning's heavy work, requiring the coolest iron and the most careful technique. These items could not withstand the heat and pressure applied to workday cotton, instead requiring gentle treatment that preserved their delicate fibers while achieving the smooth finish expected of luxury textiles. Margaret tested iron temperature more frequently when working with silk, as the protein fibers could be permanently damaged by heat levels that cotton would tolerate without difficulty. The silk scarves belonged to Margaret's employer, Mrs. Harrison, for whom Margaret provided laundry services as part of her weekly household income. These scarves represented the finest textiles in Margaret's ironing routine, imported silk in colors and patterns that reflected the latest fashion trends from European textile centers. Each scarf required individual attention, with hand-rolled hems and intricate patterns that demanded precise iron placement to avoid disturbing decorative elements while achieving overall smoothness. The handkerchiefs, both cotton and linen, varied considerably in their ironing requirements depending on their intended use and social significance. Everyday cotton handkerchiefs could withstand moderate heat and pressure, while fine linen handkerchiefs reserved for special occasions required the same careful treatment as silk items. Margaret had learned to distinguish between these categories through experience, recognizing the subtle differences in fabric weight and finish that indicated appropriate ironing techniques. The physical demands of ironing extended beyond the obvious weight of heated irons and the repetitive motions required for fabric manipulation. The combination of heat from the stove and steam from damp fabrics created an oppressive atmosphere in the kitchen, particularly during summer months when outdoor temperatures added to the internal heat load. Margaret's clothing became damp with perspiration within the first hour of work, requiring frequent breaks to wipe her face and hands to prevent moisture from transferring to clean laundry. The stove required constant attention to maintain appropriate heat levels for the rotating irons, demanding fuel management skills that balanced efficiency with consistent temperature maintenance. Coal had to be added gradually to prevent temperature spikes that might overheat irons, while insufficient fuel would allow temperatures to drop below useful levels. Margaret monitored coal consumption carefully, as fuel represented a significant household expense that required careful management to balance ironing needs with cooking requirements and heating costs. The smoke and gases produced by coal combustion added another layer of difficulty to the ironing process, particularly during winter months when kitchen ventilation remained limited to prevent heat loss. Margaret learned to recognize the signs of poor combustion that might produce dangerous gases, adjusting air dampers and fuel arrangements to maintain safe burning conditions while preserving the heat output necessary for effective ironing. The afternoon brought the second phase of ironing work, focusing on household linens that required different techniques and presented unique challenges. Bed sheets, pillowcases and towels demanded substantial physical effort due to their size and weight when damp, while their relatively coarse weave could withstand higher heat and pressure than clothing fabrics. Margaret spread bed sheets across the dining table, working in overlapping sections to press the entire surface without creating wrinkles in previously completed areas. The technique for ironing large flat items like sheets had evolved through generations of household workers seeking efficiency without sacrificing quality. Margaret folded each sheet into manageable sections, pressing each fold line carefully to create sharp creases that would facilitate proper folding and storage. The folding process itself required skill to ensure that sheets would fit into linen cupboards while maintaining their pressed appearance until use. Pillowcases required attention to their open ends where double layers of fabric created thick areas similar to tablecloth hems. Margaret used reduced heat and increased pressure for these areas, taking care to achieve smooth results without scorching the cotton fabric. The pillowcase opening required careful technique to maintain its proper shape while eliminating wrinkles that might create uncomfortable ridges against sleepers' faces. Towels presented their own ironing challenges, with their absorbent terry cloth construction requiring different techniques than smooth woven fabrics. The raised loops that provided towels drying capacity could be flattened by excessive heat or pressure, reducing their functional effectiveness while creating an unattractive appearance. Margaret used moderate heat and light pressure for towels, focusing on smoothing their flat edges and borders while preserving the texture of their absorbent surfaces. The kitchen towels, subjected to daily use and frequent washing, showed the effects of repeated exposure to heat, moisture, and household chemicals. These utilitarian items required careful ironing to extend their useful life while maintaining sanitary cleanliness standards. Margaret paid particular attention to stained areas, applying extra heat and pressure to areas where food residues or cooking oils had created persistent discoloration. The ironing routine included preparation of starch solution for items requiring extra stiffness and formality. Margaret mixed wheat starch with water in precise proportions, creating a thin liquid that could be applied to shirt collars, cuffs, and formal table linens. The starch application required timing and technique, as too much moisture would make ironing difficult while insufficient starch would fail to achieve the desired stiffness. The starched items required higher heat to activate the starch's stiffening properties, demanding careful temperature control to avoid scorching. The starch preparation process began with mixing dry wheat starch powder with cold water to create a smooth paste without lumps that might create uneven application or visible residues on finished garments. Margaret stirred the mixture thoroughly, adding hot water gradually to achieve the proper consistency for spray application. The finished starch solution had to be used within hours of preparation, as it would spoil quickly in warm kitchen conditions. Application of starch required a spray bottle constructed from a glass container fitted with a perforated metal cap that created fine droplets when shaken vigorously. Margaret applied starch solution evenly across fabric surfaces, allowing brief drying time before ironing to prevent steam explosions that might cause burns or fabric damage. The starch penetrated fabric fibers during ironing, creating the crisp finish desired for formal garments and household linens. The late afternoon period brought attention to specialized items requiring unique ironing techniques developed through years of experience with diverse fabrics and garment construction. Pleated skirts demanded careful technique to maintain their decorative folds while achieving overall smoothness. Margaret used a combination of direct ironing and steam treatment, holding the iron slightly above pleated surfaces to allow steam penetration without flattening the decorative elements. Ruffled garments, popular in women's fashion during the period, required meticulous attention to preserve their three-dimensional character while eliminating wrinkles from their gathered construction. Margaret developed specialized techniques for these items, using the iron's edge to work between ruffles while applying steam and gentle pressure to smooth the fabric without destroying its intentional texture. The day's most challenging ironing tasks involved garments with complex construction features such as tucks, darts, and fitted seams. These elements required understanding of garment construction principles as well as ironing technique, as improper pressing could permanently alter a garment's fit and appearance. Margaret approached these items with patience and care, working systematically through each construction detail to achieve professional results. Embroidered items required specialized treatment to preserve their decorative elements while achieving overall fabric smoothness. Margaret placed embroidered garments face down on towels, allowing the raised threads to sink into the soft surface while the iron contacted only the fabric backing.
This technique preserved the embroidery's dimensional quality, while smoothing the base fabric effectively. The evening hours brought completion of the ironing routine, with final attention to detail work and preparation of pressed garments for storage or immediate use. Margaret examined each completed item under good light, checking for missed wrinkles or areas requiring additional attention. This quality control process ensured that her ironing work met the standards expected by her family and employers. The final phase included proper storage techniques that would preserve the ironing results until garments were needed. Shirts were folded according to established patterns that minimized wrinkling while fitting efficiently into drawers and wardrobes. Tablecloths and sheets were folded along their pressed crease lines, creating neat packages that would maintain their smooth appearance during storage. The ironing equipment required careful maintenance at the day's conclusion, with irons cleaned and stored properly to ensure their continued effectiveness. Margaret wiped each iron surface with a damp cloth to remove any starch residue or fabric fibers that might transfer to future ironing work. The irons were allowed to cool completely before storage in a dry location that would prevent rust formation on their metal surfaces. The ironing board's padding required periodic attention to maintain its effectiveness as a pressing surface. Margaret examined the cotton cover for wear patterns and starch buildup that might affect ironing results. The wool felt padding beneath the cover needed occasional replacement as it became compressed from repeated use and exposure to moisture from steam and damp fabrics. The kitchen returned to its normal configuration after ironing day, with equipment stored away and surfaces cleaned of the starch residues and fabric fibers that accumulated during the pressing process. The stove's coal fire was banked carefully to provide cooking heat for evening meal preparation while conserving fuel for the following day's household needs. Margaret's hands showed the effects of the day's work, with small burns from accidental contact with hot irons and dry, cracked skin from exposure to steam and starch solutions. She treated these occupational hazards with homemade remedies, applying butter to minor burns and glycerin to cracked skin. These treatments provided temporary relief while her hands recovered enough for the following week's ironing routine. The weekly ironing routine represented not only a necessary household task but also a demonstration of domestic skill and social status. Well-pressed clothing and linens indicated careful household management and attention to appearances that reflected on entire families' respectability. Margaret took pride in her ironing expertise, recognizing it as valuable skill that contributed to her household's economic welfare and social standing. The physical demands of ironing contributed to long-term health consequences for women who performed this work regularly throughout their adult lives. The combination of heavy lifting, repetitive motions, and exposure to heat and steam created conditions that could lead to back problems, joint pain, and respiratory difficulties. Margaret accepted these risks as part of women's domestic responsibilities, lacking alternative methods for achieving the pressed clothing and linens that social expectations demanded.
The economic aspects of ironing extended beyond the immediate household to include commercial laundry services and domestic employment opportunities. Skilled ironing work provided income for women who took in laundry from wealthier households, while the demand for pressed clothing supported entire industries devoted to textile care and garment maintenance. The social implications of ironing work reflected broader patterns of women's labor and domestic responsibility during the period. The expertise required for effective ironing was rarely acknowledged or valued despite its complexity and importance to household function and social presentation. Women developed sophisticated technical knowledge through trial and error, passing this information through generations without formal recognition of its intellectual demands or economic value. The seasonal variations in ironing work created additional layers of complexity and challenge that tested even experienced practitioners' skills and endurance. Summer ironing required special techniques to manage the oppressive heat generated by coal stoves in already warm kitchens, with temperatures often exceeding 90 degrees Fahrenheit during afternoon ironing sessions. Margaret developed strategies for summer ironing that included beginning work before dawn to complete the most demanding tasks before peak heat hours, and opening every available window to create cross-ventilation that might provide minimal relief from the stifling conditions. Winter ironing presented different but equally challenging conditions, with coal consumption requirements competing between heating needs and ironing demands. The kitchen's warmth, welcome during cold months, still became oppressive when combined with the heat generated by multiple irons and steam from damp fabrics. Margaret learned to balance fuel usage carefully, maintaining sufficient heat for effective ironing, while conserving coal for essential heating and cooking needs throughout the cold months. The preparation of winter ironing required additional steps to manage moisture levels in heated, dry indoor air that could cause fabrics to lose dampness too quickly for effective pressing. Margaret developed techniques for maintaining proper fabric moisture, including wrapping damp garments in oiled cloth to slow evaporation and using shallow pans of water placed near the ironing area to increase humidity levels around her workspace. The regional variations in ironing techniques reflected local traditions, available materials, and climate conditions that influenced both fabric choices and pressing methods. Margaret had learned her initial ironing skills from her mother, who had emigrated from Ireland with techniques adapted to different fabrics and weather conditions than those encountered in their American household. These inherited methods required modification to accommodate American cotton textiles, different coal qualities, and local water conditions that affected starch preparation and fabric treatment. The Irish ironing traditions emphasized wool garment care, reflecting the prominence of wool textiles in Irish household economy and the climate conditions that made wool garments essential for daily wear. Margaret's mother had taught her specialized techniques for pressing wool without felting, using lower temperatures and careful moisture control to maintain the fabric's insulating properties, while achieving acceptable smoothness for public appearance. The adaptation of these techniques to American cotton textiles required experimentation and adjustment over several years as Margaret learned to work with fabrics that responded differently to heat and moisture than the wool garments that had dominated her mother's ironing experience. Cotton's tolerance for higher temperatures allowed more aggressive pressing techniques, while its tendency to scorch required careful temperature monitoring that differed from wool's more forgiving characteristics. The water quality in Margaret's American community affected starch preparation in ways that required adjustment of traditional Irish methods. The local well water contained mineral deposits that interfered with starch clarity and effectiveness, requiring filtration through cloth strainers and adjustment of starch to water ratios to achieve satisfactory results. Margaret experimented with different preparation methods, until she developed reliable techniques adapted to local conditions. The community aspects of ironing work created informal networks of knowledge sharing and mutual assistance that helped women manage the demanding requirements of household textile care. Margaret participated in these networks through church gatherings and neighborhood visits, sharing techniques and learning new methods from women with different regional backgrounds and family traditions. The Irish women in Margaret's community maintained distinctive ironing techniques that other women admired and sought to learn, particularly methods for achieving crisp linen finishes and maintaining wool garment appearance. Margaret found herself frequently consulted by neighbors seeking advice on difficult ironing challenges, establishing her reputation as particularly skilled in textile care and household management. The German families in the community brought different ironing traditions that emphasized precision and systematic organization, approaches that Margaret found useful for managing large weekly loads efficiently. The German women's techniques for organizing ironing workflow and maintaining equipment impressed Margaret with their methodical approach to household task management. The seasonal clothing requirements created dramatic variations in ironing workload and technique demands throughout the year. Spring cleaning periods required attention to wool garments being prepared for storage, with special techniques needed to ensure proper pressing before packing items away in cedar chests and storage trunks. These wool items required careful attention to moth prevention, with pressing methods that ensured complete smoothness to prevent insect hiding places while avoiding damage to delicate wool fibers. Summer clothing emphasized lightweight cotton and linen garments that required different ironing approaches than winter's heavier fabrics. The fine cotton dresses and shirts worn during hot weather demanded precise temperature control to achieve crisp appearance without scorching delicate fabrics. Margaret developed specialized techniques for these summer garments, using lower iron temperatures combined with increased moisture and multiple passes to achieve satisfactory results. The transition between seasons required preparation of different fabric weights and clothing styles with ironing techniques adjusted accordingly. Margaret's spring routine included pressing of cotton dresses that had been stored through winter months, requiring careful dampening and extended pressing to remove storage wrinkles and restore proper drape. The autumn transition involved similar attention to wool garments being returned to active use after summer storage. The laundry preparation process that preceded ironing represented a complex sequence of operations that directly affected ironing success and efficiency. Margaret's Monday wash day routine influenced Tuesday's ironing work through decisions about water temperature, soap usage, and drying methods that determined the condition of fabrics arriving at the ironing board. The washing process itself required careful attention to fabric sorting and treatment methods that would minimize ironing difficulties. Cotton items could withstand vigorous washing and wringing that removed most moisture and reduced drying time, while delicate fabrics required gentler handling that often left them damper and more challenging to iron effectively. The drying methods employed on wash day significantly influenced ironing requirements and technique demands. Items dried indoors during winter months often retained more moisture than summer outdoor drying, requiring different preparation techniques and longer ironing times to achieve satisfactory results. Margaret learned to adjust her ironing schedule based on weather conditions and drying methods used during the preceding wash day. The soap selection and usage during washing affected fabric texture and ironing requirements in ways that experienced laundresses learned to anticipate and accommodate. Harsh soaps could stiffen cotton fabrics, making them more difficult to iron smoothly, while insufficient soap left residues that interfered with starch adhesion and created uneven pressing results. The water temperature and treatment during washing influenced fabric condition and ironing demands, with hot water providing better cleaning but potentially creating shrinkage and texture changes that complicated pressing work. Margaret developed expertise in balancing washing effectiveness with ironing convenience, making decisions during wash day that would optimize Tuesday's pressing routine. The equipment maintenance requirements for effective ironing extended beyond daily cleaning to include periodic repair and replacement of tools and supplies. The flat irons themselves required occasional attention from the local blacksmith, who could repair damaged handles, smooth rough surfaces, and adjust weight distribution for optimal performance. The wooden sleeve forms and pressing aids required regular maintenance to preserve their smooth surfaces and proper shapes. Margaret sanded these tools periodically to remove rough spots that might snag delicate fabrics, and applied thin coats of oil to prevent cracking and warping that could interfere with their effectiveness. The ironing board's construction demanded ongoing attention to maintain its stability and pressing surface quality. The wooden frame required tightening of joints that loosened with repeated use and exposure to steam and moisture. Margaret's husband provided carpentry assistance for these repairs, ensuring that the ironing board remained stable and properly aligned for effective pressing work. The padding materials used on the ironing board deteriorated with use and required periodic replacement to maintain effective pressing conditions. Margaret saved wool scraps and worn fabric pieces throughout the year, accumulating materials needed for ironing board refurbishment during slack periods when household demands allowed time for such maintenance projects. The starch preparation process involved not only daily mixing but also periodic preparation of starch supplies through purchase or home production methods. Margaret bought wheat starch in bulk quantities when prices were favorable, storing it in sealed containers that protected against moisture and insect damage. The storage methods required attention to prevent starch spoilage that could affect ironing results and waste valuable household resources. The coal management aspects of ironing work required understanding of different coal grades and their burning characteristics, knowledge that affected both ironing effectiveness and household fuel economy. Margaret learned to recognize coal qualities that provided steady heat suitable for ironing work, distinguishing between coal types that burned too hot or too cool for effective iron heating. The ash removal and fire management skills necessary for maintaining proper stove conditions during ironing work required daily attention and periodic major cleaning efforts.
Margaret managed coal fire throughout ironing day to maintain consistent heat while minimizing fuel waste and preventing dangerous accumulation of ash and clinker material that could interfere with proper combustion. The timing coordination required for effective ironing involved managing multiple heated irons, fabric moisture levels, and stove conditions simultaneously, while maintaining work pace that completed weekly ironing within available time. Margaret developed internal timing systems that allowed her to rotate irons efficiently while monitoring fabric conditions and maintaining steady progress through the weekly load. The economic calculations involved in household ironing included not only direct costs for fuel and supplies but also opportunity costs for time that might be devoted to other income-producing activities. Margaret occasionally took in ironing work from neighboring families, charging rates that reflected both the skill required and the physical demands of the work while competing with commercial laundry services beginning to appear in larger towns. The social status implications of ironing quality affected family reputation and social acceptance in ways that placed additional pressure on women responsible for household textile care. Margaret understood that poorly pressed clothing reflected negatively on entire family respectability, creating social consequences that extended beyond mere appearance to include economic and marriage prospects for family members. The health consequences of regular ironing work included not only immediate injuries from burns and steam exposure, but also cumulative effects of heavy lifting, repetitive motions, and prolonged exposure to heat and humidity. Margaret accepted these occupational hazards as inevitable aspects of women's domestic responsibilities, lacking alternative methods for achieving the pressed clothing and household linens that social expectations demanded. The technological limitations of period ironing equipment meant that even skilled practitioners like Margaret could achieve only modest efficiency compared to later mechanical innovations. The multiple heated irons, manual temperature control, and individual treatment of each garment created time and energy demands that consumed entire days of women's labor for results that later technology would accomplish in hours. The cultural expectations surrounding ironing work reflected broader social attitudes about women's domestic roles and the importance of household appearance to family reputation. Margaret's expertise in ironing was valued within her community but received no recognition beyond immediate social circles, representing skilled labor that remained invisible in economic and social calculations of the period. The seasonal preparation of specialized garments required ironing techniques adapted to infrequent use items such as formal wear, holiday clothing, and ceremonial garments that demanded perfect appearance for special occasions. Margaret developed methods for pressing these items with extra care, often spending additional time to achieve results that would reflect appropriately on family status during important social events. The storage and preservation of ironed garments required techniques that would maintain pressing results until items were needed, involving careful folding methods, appropriate storage containers, and protection against moisture and insect damage that could undo hours of careful pressing work. Margaret's linen closet organization reflected sophisticated understanding of textile preservation and household management principles that maximized the value of her ironing labor through proper storage techniques.
What it was like to sweep ash from a fireplace daily. The hearth stood as the beating heart of every household, its stone or brick surround blackened by decades of daily fires, the mortar between stones darkened with soot that had settled into every crevice and pore. Each morning brought the same ritual, the same careful choreography of ash removal that had been performed in households across the centuries, a dance of maintenance that began before dawn and required tools as specific as they were humble. The ash shovel, typically fashioned from tin or iron, with a long wooden handle worn smooth by countless hands, would rest against the hearth's edge alongside the brush made from birch twigs bound with hemp cord. These tools, unremarkable in their simplicity, served as extensions of the person wielding them, instruments that had evolved through generations of use to meet the particular demands of this most necessary task. The shovel blade itself measured precisely to fit within the confines of most fireboxes, its edges filed smooth to prevent scratching the brick or stone surfaces, its handle length calculated to keep hands at a safe distance from any remaining heat. The ash itself possessed qualities that varied with the type of wood burned the previous evening. Oak ash lay heavy and dense, its particles fine enough to float in the slightest disturbance of air, carrying with it the distinctive scent of tannins that had been released during combustion. Pine ash carried a different texture, coarser and more granular, mixed with the remnants of resin that had bubbled and crystallized in the heat, creating tiny amber-colored fragments that caught the morning light filtering through the windows. Apple wood created an ash so fine it resembled flour, powdery and pale, while hickory left behind chunks of charcoal intermixed with the grey dust that would coat everything within arm's reach if not handled with proper care. The characteristics of ash changed with the seasons as well, for winter fires burned longer and hotter, creating ash that had been thoroughly combusted, reduced to its finest particles through hours of sustained heat. Summer cooking fires, brief and intense, left behind ash mixed with incompletely burned fragments, pieces of bark and wood that had escaped complete combustion, and would need to be separated from the finer material during the cleaning process. The process began with the careful removal of any remaining embers, those stubborn pieces of wood that continued to glow deep orange beneath their coating of ash, radiating heat that could still burn fingers or ignite a handful of dry kindling. These embers required gentle coaxing with the tip of the shovel, nudging them toward the back of the firebox where they could be allowed to burn themselves out completely, their heat still useful for warming the morning tea water or keeping the chill from the kitchen. The identification of live embers demanded careful observation, for they often hid beneath layers of ash, their presence revealed only by the faintest shimmer of heat or the occasional spark that betrayed their continuing combustion. Once the embers had been separated and contained, the actual sweeping could commence. The brush, held at a precise angle to avoid stirring up clouds of ash, would begin at the back corners of the firebox, working methodically across the width of the hearth. Each stroke of the brush followed the same pattern, a gentle sweeping motion that gathered the ash without launching it into the air, a technique that required patience and practice to master properly. The bristles, made from birch twigs or occasionally from horsehair, possessed the perfect combination of flexibility and firmness needed to gather ash without scratching the surfaces beneath. The proper angle for the brush varied depending on the type of ash being removed and the material lining the firebox. Brick fireboxes, with their slightly rough surfaces, required a lighter touch to prevent the bristles from catching on the mortar joints, while stone-lined fireboxes could withstand more aggressive brushing to remove ash that had settled into the natural crevices of the stone. The rhythm of brushing developed over years of practice, a steady cadence that allowed for thorough cleaning without rushing the process and creating unwanted ash clouds. The ash would be guided toward the mouth of the fireplace where the shovel waited, its broad surface positioned to catch the grey powder as it was swept forward. This coordination between brush and shovel demanded a rhythm, a steady pace that allowed the ash to settle onto the metal surface without bouncing or scattering. Too quick a motion would send ash swirling upward, coating the person doing the sweeping and settling back onto surfaces that had already been cleaned. The shovel itself required careful positioning, angled slightly to create a natural funnel that would guide the ash onto its surface while preventing spillage around the edges. The technique of gathering ash onto the shovel involved a series of gentle sweeping motions, each building upon the previous one to create a small mound of ash that could be safely transported. The brush would work in arcs, starting wide and gradually narrowing as the ash accumulated, with each pass gathering more material toward the center. This process required constant attention to the behavior of the ash, adjusting the pressure and angle of the brush based on how the particles responded to each movement. The filled shovel would then be carried to the ash bucket, a container typically made from galvanized metal or occasionally from wood bound with iron hoops. The bucket itself required careful consideration, for ash retained heat longer than might be expected, and the wrong container could char or even ignite if the ash contained hidden embers. The size of the bucket determined how many trips would be required to complete the cleaning, with larger buckets reducing the number of journeys but increasing the weight that needed to be carried, particularly when ash accumulated from several days of fires. The transfer from shovel to bucket demanded steady hands and a slow, controlled motion, tilting the shovel gradually to allow the ash to slide gently into the container without creating a cloud of dust. This transfer technique required practice to master, learning the proper angle at which to hold the shovel and the speed at which to tip it to ensure smooth flow of ash into the bucket. The interior of the bucket would gradually build up layers of ash, each deposit settling into patterns that revealed the history of previous cleanings. Between each trip from hearth to bucket, the process would pause while the ash settled, those moments of stillness allowing any disturbed particles to drift back down rather than remaining suspended in the air. This waiting formed an essential part of the routine, a necessary patience that prevented the ash from coating nearby furniture, curtains, or the person performing the task. During these pauses, the careful observer might notice how the ash moved through the air, following invisible currents and drafts that revealed the subtle airflow patterns within the room. The bucket, once filled, would be carried outside to the ash pit or compost area, following paths that had been established through years of this same daily journey. These paths, worn smooth by countless trips, often showed traces of ash that had been spilled during transport, creating pale tracks across floors and thresholds that marked the route from hearth to disposal area. The weight of a full ash bucket varied considerably depending on the type of wood that had been burned, with hardwood ash weighing significantly more than ash from softwoods. The outdoor disposal of ash required its own considerations and techniques. The ash pit, if one existed, would be positioned downwind from the house to prevent ash from blowing back toward doors and windows. The pit itself might be lined with stones or simply dug into the earth, its depth determining how long it could serve before requiring emptying or relocation. Some households maintained multiple ash disposal areas, rotating between them to allow previously deposited ash to weather and break down before being incorporated into garden soil. The ash itself possessed value beyond its removal from the hearth, serving as an essential component in soap making, providing potash for the kitchen garden, or being mixed with clay to create a mortar for minor repairs around the property. The collection and preservation of ash for these purposes required additional steps in the disposal process, with the finest ash being separated and stored in covered containers while coarser material was dispersed directly onto garden beds or compost piles. The process of ash separation involved sifting through screens made from metal mesh or tightly woven cloth, allowing the finest particles to fall through while retaining larger fragments of charcoal and incompletely burned wood. These screens, often homemade from materials available around the household, required regular cleaning to prevent clogging and maintain their effectiveness. The sifting process itself created additional ash dust, requiring careful handling and often outdoor location to prevent indoor contamination. The fireplace, now cleared of ash, would reveal the pattern of bricks or stones beneath, their surfaces marked by the staining that came from years of heat and smoke. These marks told their own story: darker patches where the fire had burned most intensely, lighter areas where the flames had reached less frequently, creating a map of countless evenings spent beside the hearth. The cleaning process would sometimes reveal cracks in the masonry or areas where mortar had begun to deteriorate, problems that required attention to maintain the safety and efficiency of the fireplace. The examination of the cleaned firebox provided an opportunity to assess the condition of the fireplace structure itself. Loose bricks, cracked mortar, or signs of excessive heat damage could be identified and addressed before they became serious problems. This inspection formed an integral part of the ash removal routine, combining cleaning with basic maintenance in a single daily activity. The cleaning of the shovel and brush required its own attention, the metal surface wiped clean with a damp cloth to prevent rust, the bristles of the brush shaken free of ash and occasionally rinsed with water to maintain their effectiveness. The wooden handles of both tools needed periodic treatment with oil or wax to prevent drying and cracking, maintenance that extended their useful life and kept them comfortable to grip during use. These tools, properly maintained, would serve for years, their handles wearing smooth with use, their surfaces taking on the patina that came from daily contact with ash and soot. The maintenance of ash removal tools involved understanding the properties of the materials from which they were constructed. Iron tools required protection from moisture to prevent rust, often achieved by storing them in dry locations and occasionally treating them with thin coats of oil. Wooden handles expanded and contracted with changes in humidity, sometimes requiring tightening of any metal fittings or replacement of handles that had cracked or split with age and use. The area around the hearth demanded attention as well, the stone or wooden floor requiring sweeping to remove any ash that had escaped the careful process of removal. This secondary cleaning used a different brush, one with softer bristles that could capture the fine dust without scratching the floor surface, working in long gentle strokes that gathered the ash toward the center where it could be collected with a dustpan. The floor cleaning extended beyond the immediate hearth area to include the surrounding space where ash might have drifted during previous cleanings or been tracked by footsteps. The anions, those metal supports that held the logs during burning, would need their own cleaning, their surfaces wiped free of ash and soot that accumulated during the night's fire. These pieces, often decorative as well as functional, required gentle handling to preserve their appearance while removing the residue that would otherwise build up and eventually affect their function. The cleaning of anions involved removing them from the fireplace entirely, allowing access to all surfaces and joints where ash and soot might accumulate. The process of cleaning anions required specific techniques depending on their construction and decoration. Simple iron anions could be scrubbed with steel wool or wire brushes, while more ornate pieces with brass or bronze elements required gentler treatment to avoid damaging decorative surfaces. The joints and crevices in anion construction provided hiding places for ash and soot that required careful attention with small brushes or cloth-wrapped tools to ensure complete cleaning. The process of ash removal extended beyond the immediate area of the hearth to include the cleaning of any surfaces within reach of the ash dust. Mantels, nearby furniture, decorative items, and even the walls themselves would require regular attention to prevent the gradual accumulation of ash that could, over time, coat everything in a fine gray layer that dulled colors and textures throughout the room. This extended cleaning process often revealed the full extent of ash dispersion, with particles found in unexpected locations far from the original source. The cleaning of surfaces around the fireplace required different approaches depending on the materials involved. Wooden surfaces could be wiped with damp cloths, while fabric upholstery might require brushing or even professional cleaning to remove embedded ash particles. Stone and brick surfaces, being more porous, sometimes required scrubbing with stiff brushes to remove ash that had penetrated the surface texture. The timing of this daily routine varied with the seasons and the household's schedule, but most often occurred in the early morning hours before the day's activities began in earnest. This timing allowed the ash to be removed while it was cool, reducing the risk of burns or accidental fires, and ensured that the hearth would be ready for the evening's fire without the previous day's accumulation interfering with the new flames. The early morning timing also took advantage of stable air conditions, when drafts and air currents were minimal, reducing the likelihood of ash becoming airborne during the cleaning process. The coordination of ash removal with other household activities required careful planning and consideration. The task needed to be completed before food preparation began, to prevent ash contamination of cooking areas, and before the general household cleaning commenced to avoid spreading ash dust to recently cleaned surfaces. This scheduling often meant that ash removal became one of the first tasks of the day, performed while the household was still quiet and other activities had not yet begun. The ash removal process required different approaches depending on the weather outside, for wind could carry ash dust back into the house or scatter it across surfaces that had already been cleaned. On particularly windy days, the bucket might be covered with a cloth during transport, or the ash might be dampened slightly to prevent it from becoming airborne during disposal. Rainy weather created its own challenges, as ash could become muddy and difficult to handle, while also creating slippery conditions for carrying loaded buckets. Weather considerations extended to the indoor environment as well, with humidity levels affecting how ash behaved during cleaning. High humidity could cause ash to clump together, making it easier to collect but harder to sweep cleanly from surfaces. Low humidity increased the tendency for ash to become airborne, requiring more careful handling and longer settling periods between cleaning steps. The seasonal changes brought their own considerations to the ash removal routine. Winter ash, produced by fires that burned continuously for warmth, accumulated more quickly and required more frequent attention.
The ash from winter fires also tended to be more thoroughly combusted, creating finer particles that were more difficult to contain during cleaning. Summer ash, from occasional cooking fires or evening comfort, came in smaller quantities but still demanded the same careful attention to prevent buildup and maintain the hearth's cleanliness. Spring cleaning seasons often involved more thorough ash removal procedures, with deep cleaning of the entire fireplace system including the cleaning of chimney connections and smoke chambers. These seasonal deep cleans required additional tools and often involved moving furniture and protective coverings to prevent damage from the more extensive cleaning procedures. The tools used for ash removal evolved slowly over time, with slight modifications appearing as metalworking techniques improved or as individual households developed preferences for particular designs. Some shovels featured curved edges that helped contain the ash during transport, while others had perfectly flat surfaces that allowed for more complete removal from the firebox corners. The handles varied in length and thickness, with some designed for specific types of fireplaces or particular user preferences. Regional variations in ash removal tools reflected local manufacturing capabilities and traditional techniques passed down through generations. Northern regions, where fireplaces saw heavy use throughout long winters, often developed more robust tools designed for frequent use, while southern areas might favor lighter implements suited to occasional use during cooler months. The disposal of ash followed patterns that varied by region and household customs. Some families maintained dedicated ash pits at specific distances from the house, while others incorporated ash directly into their gardening routines, spreading it among vegetables that benefited from its alkaline properties. The ash from different types of wood served different purposes, with hardwood ash preferred for soap making and softwood ash finding use in other household applications. The location of ash disposal areas required careful consideration of prevailing wind patterns, drainage and proximity to wells or water sources. Ash pits positioned too close to houses could create problems with ash blowing back onto clean surfaces, while those placed too far away made the daily disposal routine more burdensome. The ideal location balanced convenience with practical considerations of wind, water, and household traffic patterns. The daily nature of this task meant that it became as routine as any other household maintenance, performed with the same careful attention but without conscious thought of the steps involved. The rhythm of brush, shovel, and bucket became automatic, allowing the mind to wander while the hands performed their familiar work, a meditation of sorts that marked the transition from night to day in countless households across the centuries. This automatic quality of the routine masked the complexity of the task and the accumulated knowledge required to perform it efficiently and safely. The seemingly simple act of removing ash involved understanding fire behavior, material properties, weather patterns, and household scheduling, all integrated into a seamless daily practice that appeared effortless to observers but represented years of acquired skill and experience. The ash itself would continue to hold heat long after it appeared cold, requiring careful handling even hours after removal from the fireplace. This retained heat, while not visible, could ignite dry materials or cause burns to unwary hands, adding an element of caution to what might otherwise seem like a simple cleaning task. The thermal properties of ash varied with its composition, with some types retaining heat much longer than others, requiring different handling techniques and safety precautions. The hidden dangers of seemingly cold ash led to the development of specific testing techniques to ensure safety during handling. These might include observing the ash for any shimmer of heat, testing with small amounts of water to detect steam, or simply allowing extended cooling periods before handling. The consequences of misjudging the temperature of ash could range from minor burns to serious fires, making these safety procedures an essential part of the ash removal routine. The process of ash removal connected each household to a tradition that stretched back through generations, a daily ritual that had remained essentially unchanged despite the passage of centuries. The same careful motions, the same attention to detail, the same patient gathering of ash had been performed by countless hands and countless hearths, creating a thread of continuity that linked the present to the distant past through the simple act of keeping the hearth clean and ready for the next fire. This continuity of practice created a shared understanding across households and generations, with techniques and knowledge passed down from parent to child, creating a common vocabulary of movement and method that transcended individual households. The universality of the ash removal routine meant that anyone familiar with the process could step into any household and perform the task with minimal instruction, the tools and techniques being essentially the same regardless of location or social standing. The ash removal process also served as a daily reminder of the household's dependence on fire for warmth, cooking and light, connecting the occupants to the fundamental realities of their existence through the simple act of cleaning up after the previous day's flames. This connection to basic needs and natural processes provided a grounding influence in daily life, marking time not by clocks but by the rhythm of fire and ash, warmth and cleaning, preparation and maintenance that defined the household's relationship with the natural world.